Get them fired up and get them to the staging lanes, baby, because 8th Mile Apparel is now carrying Going Bracket Racing merch. Hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and much more can be yours today by visiting 8thmileapparel.com. We appreciate each and every one of you guys supporting the Going Bracket Racing YouTube and Facebook pages.
What's up, everybody? GBR is back. We missed last week, but we're back with you now. George had a little bit of a sickness, and I had a little bit of a hiatus as well, so it kind of all worked out. We're getting ready to watch some racing this weekend. I think Motor Mania is finally going to be live. It's February 6, 2024, episode 143 of the Going Bracket Racing live show, coming to you every single Tuesday, 5 Eastern, 4 Central Time on YouTube, Facebook, and it obviously goes out to your favorite podcast platform afterwards, whenever I can get it up. We don't know when that is, but it usually is about 5-6 days afterwards. If you want to participate in the live chat, you always need to come up here. GBR Live, brought to you by and thanks to TSR Racing Products, BRG 3D printed parts, Syntex Printing out there in Temple, Texas, Driven Racing Oil, where you can use the code GBR10, get yourself 10% off your order. Proform Parts, visit proformparts.com to get your carburetors, alternators, starters, distributors, radiators, and much, much more. Crew Chief Pro software to get those dial-ins in order. You got a brand new combination this year. Crew Chief Pro will get it figured out for you before you can. I promise you that. And you notice I got this chain on right here. Can you see that, George? Is that in the frame? We got these new Tree Chopper shirts.
It's in there, yeah.
We finally got the Tree Chopper shirts available on 8thmileapparel.com. I got to get some over to Blaine Parrish and Thomas Davis for winning the Morton Brothers practice tree race the other night. I got them sitting on my desk right now. I told them I was going to send it to the Cupid race at Goliath. That's the first race of the year for all of us. And or I could just bring him over to Blaine's house. He just has to text me or something. So we'll see how it goes, man. But I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, man, because we're going to have a big show, probably one of the biggest shows we've had since Brett Kepner, because this is kind of the protege of Brett Kepner, if I do say so myself. And I think he might say that as well. So let's get on Brian Lohnes.
How we doing, guys? Thank you for having me. And yeah, man, that's a high honor. I appreciate that. Brett is a good friend and somebody that I certainly respect and admire everything he's done in his career for sure.
Yeah, we had Brett on. We probably need to. We still need to make sure we have a part 2, 3.
Oh yeah,
4, 5. Possibly 5. I think we can have plenty parts with Brett.
So basically, you had a typical phone conversation with Brett Kepner. That is normally when you get on the phone with him, it requires a multitude of post calls to finish up the original call. Yeah.
What were we talking about again? Oh yes, one of those moments. Yeah, it definitely was a heck of an episode. Casey, it's hard to believe that was almost 2 years ago. Now I believe so. Geez, we've been at it for a while here on Going Bracket Racing Community. Yeah, we gotta get that one back, man. But as we get into the show, guys, this is we'll treat it as much as we can as open discussion with Brian here, and maybe we can get a few of your questions in. So if you got them, put them in that chat. You know what to do, and I'll do the best I can to monitor them and get them out. As always, here at Going Bracket Racing Community, we like to figure out how it all got started. So Brian, coming live from you at GBR. How did you get started in drag racing?
It was a very successful work release program from prison. I'm glad. No, it was for me. It was, growing up as a kid, my dad was a drag racer, a bracket racer through the 70s. And when I came along in the early 80s, he stepped away from the race cars, but was still into hot rods and muscle cars and stuff. And we watched drag racing every week, and it was just something we did. We got National Dragster to the house, a bunch of car magazines every month. So for me, My, drag racing early education was the occasional trip to the racetrack, but most of it, reading National Dragster and about Kenny Bernstein and Joe Amato and these guys named the Edmonds that seemed to be pretty good at drag racing, or the Richardsons rather, that seemed to be pretty good at drag racing back in the day and still pretty good at drag racing today. So, that for me was really how I got into it. And of course, then I got older, had a driver's license and was going to test in 2 nights and started working at, New England Dragway in the tech department, was announced at Lebanon Valley in New York. And, that's really what kind of put me on the path to where I'm at today. But yeah, man, my first exposure to it was Diamond P Sports and Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, man, and that was the best. And I'm glad on Roku, if all of you don't know, you can watch a lot of the old NHRA stuff on there from Diamond P, which is it's great. Me and my son watch that on the weekends. He might not remember it quite yet, but that's what we do. But I want to talk a little bit about your career progression, man, because Massachusetts doesn't scream drag racing to a lot of people. And I want to talk a little bit about bankshift.com because a lot of people know about that, but they don't realize, a lot of people think that's Chad Reynolds' deal, but that's Chad Reynolds and Brian Lohnes.
Yes. Yeah.
In that whole deal.
Yeah. So we founded, it was actually to start it in 2008. It was myself, David Freiberger, and Chad Reynolds. So Freiberger had left Hot Rod Magazine to start a website called Car Junkie TV, which was him and Chad. And if they had started it like 3 years later, it would have been a huge success. It was like a super video heavy website. And it had a lot of some private equity investors in it. Well, the economy tanked at the end of 2008. Away went the private investors. David actually went back to the publishing company and, kind of turned over what was then Car Junkie TV to Chad and I, because I had worked with David doing some content and stuff with the other website. There was no assets per se. And he's just like, if you guys want this, you can have it. And so we took it and grew it into, a pretty successful blog site. Still goes every day. I still wake up in the morning and bang some content out every morning. So does Chad. And we live streamed a lot of stuff over the course of years. Don't do as much of that anymore per se, but it was neat to be in those early years of the live streaming stuff. For me, I worked regular jobs. I got out of college. I worked regular jobs for 10 years as I was doing all this stuff on the side. Like I was freelancing for Bobby Bennett. I was writing for a bunch of different magazines. I was working at Epping pretty much on the weekends. And then I started working for IHRA. Literally I would be like hiding in the bathroom of IHRA national events, taking work calls and like being on conference calls when I was supposed to be in the office. I had a multitude of distant family members pass away over the course of my actual employment. My third aunt's cousin died. I got to get out for the weekend and go do this. I actually announced a national event at Epping one time, the IHRA national event at Epping. I went into my office in the morning, told them I was visiting customers, left, changed into my IHRA uniform, went and announced the whole day of qualifying, changed back into my work clothes, and drove back in at like 7:00 that night to check the drivers. And I was managing truck fleets to check the drivers back in. So, so it was a long and sometimes interesting road for sure.
So how does all of that inevitably lead to NHRA's main guy?
Man, so that story is pretty interesting, and some of you have heard it, maybe some of you haven't. But so I announced for IHRA in the national event level until about 2011, and at that time the series had just kind of it went away. It wasn't as fun anymore. Like when Bill Bader Sr. owned it, it was a friggin' riot to work there. It was great. Like we had a lot of attitude, a lot of pride. We really were a kind of little brother to the NHRA, and we would poke them in the side with sticks. I mean, it was a really fun place to go. Innovative. Very sportsman centric. It was very cool. Over the course of time, it got sold. Things changed anyway. So I step away from that at like 2010, 2011. And I kind of at that point decided I had accomplished what I was going to accomplish. I thought, hey, listen, I became a national event announcer. I was happy with what I had done. And then the New England Dragway, I was just working there on the weekends and doing some regional stuff. New England Dragway switched sanction. And so in 2012, Steve Gibbs came to the track to look at the pits, to lay the pits out for what was going to be the first New England Hot Rod reunion. I happened to be calling whatever was going on that day, and he came to the tower and he said, hey, will you want to come next year and do my national Hot Rod reunion in Bowling Green, Kentucky? I said, yeah. I mean, I love nostalgia drag racing, love the history of the sport. I'm like, I'm in. Fast forward to that event. That event happens in early June of 2013. As I'm at the racetrack in Bowling Green, Bob Fry walks into the race control room. And I'm like, damn, I never met Bob before. I knew who he was, idolized the guy. He kind of waved and went off and did his thing. Like 2 hours later, he walks back in and he goes, who the hell are you? Like, who are you? And so this was the cosmic part of the whole story. The following weekend was going to be the first NHRA national event at New England Dragway. So Bob Fry left Bowling Green, called this guy, Jerry Archambault, who then worked for the NHRA, and said, this guy needs a tryout. Like, this guy, you got to hear this guy. And so that next weekend, I was in my home tower calling Super Gas and Super Stock and Super Comp. And it was the best tryout in the world because I had all the answers to the test. Like, every guy that rolled up, like, oh, this guy's
actually knew who they were. He's
got 3 daughters and his son's engaged. And it was like, wow. And it was just like, it was pretty amazing. And to me, like, that connection with Bob Fry, like, you know, nothing's cooler than that for a guy like him to look at you and say, man, somebody needs to hear you. So that's,
yeah, man. Bob Fry, quite possibly, in my opinion, the greatest announcer of all time.
Absolutely. Mount Rushmore guy, 100% a Mount Rushmore guy.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so then, you know, the 2014 season, I did like 5 or 6 events. And then 2015, I started doing the whole tour, and it's been going like gangbusters since.
Ever since. Definitely very good to get on and actually have really good commentary behind what's actually happening at the racetrack on the NHRA days, live on Fox Sports. So it's a lot different than being live on GBR, guys. I'm pretty sure it might feel the same, but geez, wide open.
And I've really tried hard over the years to like maintain, you know, do as much outside stuff as I can, you know, whether it's some of the small tire stuff. Obviously I just did US Street Nationals and the Snowbirds, some Outlaw Pro Mod stuff. You know, haven't been up there. Me and Bob Unkerfer called the big $1 million SFG race that happened up in 2020 up in Michigan. So I really honestly try to be as in as many facets of drag racing as I can be. I think that is why, and one, I love the whole sport, but 2, it just keeps me in a good place that I can understand what I'm looking at.
Quite interesting, and a perfect segue. You mentioned SFG. I believe you said 1.1 million was the one you actually went to. Historic event for sure. Yep. And my question for the next question I was going to ask here is, what is the biggest thing that you've been part of in drag racing for yourself, and as well as maybe just being a part of historically?
Man, that's a great question. And so many of these things, to me, have like their own place. Like I remember Outlaw Streetcar Union, the Tyler Crossnose race up in Virginia a few years ago. We were getting into eliminations, rains on Sunday, pushed to Monday. And so I remember calling, at the time, it was a side-by-side race between Stevie Fast and David Reese, and it was like a 350 and a 352 on radials, which then, I mean, it was the quickest side-by-side pass ever, and I'm sure it's still probably up there as one of the quickest side-by-sides. That was unbelievable. John Force's 150th, that was unreal. Doug Coletta's championship. But I'll be honest with you, Steve Sisko in the middle of the freaking night in that little Chevy 2, pulling wheelies and knocking people off and then winning that race will forever be a top 5 for me. That was, when you look at, you know, you have to be knowledgeable of what you're looking at, as everybody watching this is. But when you go pound for pound through the people who were in that facility that weekend and what he was in for a car, which obviously was a good car, but it is, as you guys well know, that is not the car you win $1 million with at one of these races.
And it was broken, turns out.
Right. It was.
The rear end was broken.
And then he gets in another car the next day. People forget that he won the next day.
Yeah. Yep. Just a little $100,000.
Yeah.
Just $100.
Like that, you know, to me that was great. The moment when he won that race, he drove the car back up the racetrack and it was clunking and chunking and banging its whole way up because I think the ring gear, they chewed a couple of teeth off the thing, but everybody swarmed him. It was some ungodly hour of the night, but it was, to me, that was like, that's a top 5 one for me ever, because that was unreal.
Wow.
Well, it's crazy to think that a sport, and like you said, that's a car that should not be winning $1 million. It's essentially, you know, that car, I mean, it was a very nice race car, but let's just say in the best day, that car might be worth $45,000.
Right.
You know, and but the thing is it's like, you would think a Top Fuel dragster would be what you need to win $1 million. But in reality, you could buy that car 20 times with what he just won.
And the man's name escapes me, but the guy he raced in the final was like a local Michigan racer too. It was not necessarily one of the big marquee.
Orange and black dragster, right? Man, some with a B, I feel like.
And he was the guy, and it wasn't like some fluke. I mean, he was very well known in that region, in that area, and I think he had won.
He was doubled very late in the race.
Right.
Yeah. Between that and the other memory I'll have, among others, working with Uncle for Bob. I worked with Bob for years in the IHRA, and just a spectacular man. And it's sad that he's gone. But there was a guy that had a silverish, let's call it grayish, G-body Cutlass that was just, I mean, it was a bracket bomber. Like, I look at that car and it's like, man, some dude's rolling in an open trailer, and this is how he goes racing. And I love him for it. He came up to the tower, and he had gone down to 16 or 32 cars. Like, the split was real money, like real money. And he walked in and he's like, hey, I didn't even go to the split meeting because I thought I was going to throw up. He's like, I've been so nervous. He's like, I need to know how much I won. And I believe he had won $100,000. He had gone deep enough that his portion of the split was $100,000. And the guy started weeping. I mean, that to me, that kind of struck a nerve with me too, because it was, you hear about the life-changing money and then this and that, and I get it. But like, when you see like a normal dude who God only knows if this guy had ever won a local bracket race in his life comes up and somebody tells him you just pulled home 6 figures on a car that makes Cisco's car look like $1 million.
Right.
That's for real. Yeah.
Hey, by the way, the name of the driver next to him was Bill Swain, thanks to Kevin Little.
Billy Swain.
Yep.
Yeah, man. That's the thing about bracket racing nowadays, is that if it's your day, like, it can legitimately change your life. There are so many things. For example, me and George, right before the show started, we were talking to our buddy Dylan Champion, who's commenting right here. And he's like, man, I'm going to try to run VMP's triple threat this year. I don't know how it's going to go, but we'll see what happens. But I mean, the thing is, first of all, you don't know if you're not there. Second of all, bracket racing nowadays, I mean, you can legitimately win enough money where, maybe you can't buy a house with it, but you could pay your house off with it. Right. And imagine how much money you would have. George and I were just talking about this earlier today. Imagine how much money you'd have if you just didn't have a house payment. How much easier would life be if you didn't have rent, didn't have a house payment? I mean, it would be life-changing. But I digress. We were talking about the U.S. Street Nationals just a second ago.
Sure.
And I want to talk about 300-mile-an-hour door slammers, because a couple years ago, and it may have been a little bit too soon a couple years ago, but I had said when I was watching Steve Jackson test his car in Outlaw trim, I said, man, how long is it going to be until we can see a heads-up grudge race between somebody like Steve Jackson, who would do it, and a fuel funny car? Yeah. Because fuel funny cars run like 3 teens, 320s to the eighth. Yeah. Dude, we're getting real close. Turbo Todd, 514 to the quarter, letting off, I think, at 1,000 foot, supposedly, because the windshield was collapsing. Yeah. Mark Mickey said on Stevie and Lyle's podcast, Shake and Bake show, I think Mark Mickey said last week that whenever Jose went 535 in his car, the wind pressure physically cracked the fenders. So, yeah. I mean, dude, just flat out, I guess I'll just say it, have or will door cars become a contender for the fanfare of the nitro ranks?
I think there's a couple things to address there. The first one is your concept of the door car versus the nitro funny car thing. So a little bit off track, but I'll take it back to where we started in a second. Several years ago, I did a show on Motor Trend called Put Up or Shut Up, and you can find it. You can watch it on Amazon or whatever. It's all posted now. But it was a show where we would race dissimilar things that ran close to the same time. So we did drag racing episodes, stock car episodes. We put motorcycles on nitro motorcycles on dirt. We drag raced pulling tractors. Like, we did all kinds of wild stuff. Wow. The season that was going to happen next, before when the show got canceled, was we had an episode we were going to make, and Cruz Pedregon had agreed to do it with us. We had talked to Bob Brockmeyer to do the programming on it. We were going to run heads up, Cruz Pedregon against Stevie Fast Jackson. Now, this was the time when radial cars were running. In like the three, I want to say probably the three, let's call it 380s or something like that. Basically, we were going to set it up where the radial car, where the funny car ran to 1,000 feet. They would leave heads up, and the funny car finish line was 1,000 feet, and the radial finish line was 8th mile. and we were going to run them off an unstaggered tree, but the finish line distance was staggered. Show got canceled. We never got to do it, but that would have been a crowning life achievement, I think. So when we look at the door slammer thing, I think there's a couple things. One, 273 mile an hour speed with the parachutes out. So let's just say with some safety that he was at least going 290 miles an hour, right? I think we can say that without even really pushing ourselves.
It went like 107 or something from 8th mile to quarter mile. Something insane.
No, just ridiculous. And so to me, there's a couple factors. The first one is, and I don't know how much people have talked about it, but the tires were in horrendous shape after that run. They were chunked really bad and blistered really bad. So you mentioned the windshield trying to come in. You mentioned that, we talk about the tires, which were brought to a place of performance they were never designed to be in the first place. So the answer is drag racing and drag racers through history have always fixed these problems, right? You put a fuel tire on it or you reinforce the body somehow. These are all things that can be done. Whether they should be done or not, maybe that's the big question. And I think when it comes down to brass tacks, if you put a 300 mile an hour Pro Mod next to a 300 mile an hour funny car, I do think the funny car is going to get more attention simply because of the way it looks, sounds, and smells. I would love to see him running heads up, though. I mean, imagine if we ever lived in a world, which I don't know if we ever will, but if we were able to live in a world where there was some sort of effectively an open, almost an old school throwback to the beginning of time top eliminator, where if it's got a body on it, if it fits, it ships, or if it has a body on it, it runs. I mean, something like that would be pretty great.
Wow.
I don't know how much. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say who it is because it's out of respect for him, but there is somebody this year, probably late summer, early fall, that has a car that is specifically built to do what Todd Moyer almost did in his car, that is going to make a very serious attempt at 4-second, 300 mile an hour full bodied runs. And this is a car that has been built for the task, if you will. And I think some of the things that have happened over some of these other runs have led to a couple of design changes, but car's complete, drivetrain's complete. And I'm sure it'll be announced in the next, couple of months.
Just kind of thought that I've always wondered, I guess I should say, that at a certain point, nitro stuff is just so unattainable. And I mean, Pro Mod's kind of unattainable too, but it's not as unattainable as nitro. For example, if the three of us all got together, we could have a Pro Mod team. We couldn't have a nitro team. 3 salaries can make a Pro Mod team. I mean, any more at a competitive level, I'd debate that. Honestly,
you need more.
I would debate that. Yeah, I think and I just think it is what it is when you look at it. I mean, you're certainly right about the fuel stuff. I mean, it's insane, right? I mean, the part-time guys that come out, I love them, and the commitment they have is amazing. But when you're going to do this 22 times a year, it's just off the charts with 7 to 10 guys. But man, the Pro Mod thing, I mean, you get done building one of those things with an engine and a spare engine and a couple of spare transmissions and maybe a spare rear end, we're $500,000 in before we put anything in the truck, aren't we?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is true. And but I guess my overall point is that do you think that NHRA will ever unleash the Pro Mods, because they can go way faster than what they're allowing them to go? And obviously, this was the problem with fuel for years and years and years, and still is today. The real reason, other than the stopping distance, is a tire can't hold up to. Now, I assume if they said, hey, we want to go 350 mile an hour, someone's going to figure out how we're going to be able to do that.
Agreed.
The car can do it. The tire can't do it. Everything else can do it.
Yeah, and I do not necessarily think you're going to see Pro Mods. I don't think, in my mind, and this isn't anything that's written in stone or in a rule book or a secret NHRA book of, tall tales anywhere, but I don't think anybody has a big desire to see, and we almost did. I don't think they have a big desire to see 270 mile an hour door cars. I really think that the 250, 260 mile an hour range is probably where they would have their feet in the sand. That's just my guess. But I don't know. When we talk about fuel cars and 340 miles an hour, and don't get me wrong, the Goodyear guys have said 340, we're okay with 340. Like, they've come out and said the tire's engineered there, and they've said that publicly. But to your point, it's like it's the always slippery slope of drag racing. Well, hey, 341, right? 343, right? All of a sudden, it's all of a sudden a 350, right? And so, I do not, in my own mind, think you're going to see pro mods unleashed to the point where they can do anything like what Todd Moyer did.
Not legally. Not legally.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Because let's be honest, is that just a legitimate pro mod car that ran 514? No. I was fixing to say there's got to be something different in downforce.
It probably has
different all over that car to keep
I'm sure it was
that long.
Absolutely as light as possible to actually physically work, and I'm sure it had all the boost.
I got you.
But, I think it's at the end of the day, all hail the E-gate, because that's what allowed that to happen.
Absolutely. That E-gate, that I think they sold more of those in the ensuing 48 hours after Todd's run than they have since they invented the thing. And I think outwardly, to speak to your point, I think outwardly Todd's car is as pro mod as it gets. I mean, the body is the same, that 5-star Camaro body that a lot of guys run. But I think as we're talking about, internally in terms of stripping all the weight out of it, and they went down at the Snowbirds to kind of make a point, because they hung a lot of weight on that combination, and they went down there and still ran. They had run like 231 at the World Street Finals or World Street Nationals in Orlando. They put a bunch of weight on it for Snowbirds, and they came right back out and ran like 230 with it again. It's like, how do you, unless you tie it to a tree, I don't know how you slow it down. But that's an incredible car.
Ultimately, if you can make the motor take it, nothing can really be faster than a turbo car, because it can leave it however much boost that the track will take at all times, where everything else, even subtly, it has to build up to it if it's crank driven.
Yeah, and at this point, like you're talking about with the E-gate, the infinite management you're being able to, and that's really what people ask, like, why turbochargers were not that popular for a long time. And for us, it's just normal stuff now the last 10 or 15 years. But when you go back to the early quote unquote modern turbo cars, when Annette Summer was out trying her car out, when Mike Moran first had his car out years ago, the idea, it was electronic fuel injection and boost management were the two things that allowed turbo cars to do, what they were doing then, and certainly what they do now. So the more finite and infinite control you get over the boost management, the more competitive and ultimately faster the things are going to be. Yeah.
You can go all the way back to it actually might be something that's on your channel, actually, but wasn't it Buddy Ingersoll right in the turbocharged 6-cylinder Buick back in the day?
Yeah, so I mean, the very first turbocharged car that is historically recorded as winning anything of consequence was 1965 at the Winter Nationals. There were two brothers in California that had the Malicote brothers. They had a Willys that had a small block Chevy in it with two Air Research turbos that were drawing through a pair of Carter carburetors, and they won B-Gas Supercharged class now nearly 60 years ago with a twin turbocharged car. And Buddy Ingersoll in the 80s famously it was an ex-Warren Johnson Pro Stock car. He worked with Buick and McLaren, and it had a 3.8 liter effectively stage 2 V6, much in many ways similar to what was in the Indy cars at that time, with turbos on it. And the big fallacy is, NHRA banned it from Pro Stock. Well, they never allowed it in Pro Stock, but the IHRA did, and they allowed it for a one season, and then he made the finals in Bristol, barely lost to Bob Glidden, and shortly thereafter, the turbos were no longer as welcome in any Pro Stock anywhere. But that was like.
No, that makes perfect sense. Great time here to get a chance for our marketing partners to have a few words here at the Going Bracket Racing Live community. Keep those questions coming in. I'll do the best that I can right after this break to at least get a couple of those out to Brian and see if we can get some answers, maybe put a couple smiles on some people's face. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you hit the like, the share, and we'll return here in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining.
BRG Motorsports 3D printed racing parts are able to provide you with whatever you desire to enhance your drag racing operation. Items like safety belt magnets, nitrous bottle holders, and even quick release delay box mounts are able to be obtained from BRG Motorsports 3D printed racing parts. Have a look at top selling items such as helmet hooks and steering wheel hooks, which are proven to make it easier to maneuver throughout your race car. You can contact BRG Motorsports 3D printed racing parts at telephone number 765-729-1177.
Our third-generation slim wireless vehicle scale is worth the wait. You can read cross weight, side-by-side weight, and front and rear weight, in addition to the standard weight for each wheel and total vehicle weight. You can also view on the included backlit LCD screen, complete with control buttons. The full-size 15 by 15-inch aluminum scale pads are only 1/5/16 inches thick. Each pad can hold up to 1,750 pounds for a total scale capacity of 7,000 pounds.
TSR Racing Products has everything you need to make your Power Glide Turbo 350, Turbo 400, and 727 transmissions the best they can be on the street or at the track. With exceptional products, customer service, and over 30 years of experience, TSR Racing Products is always available to help their customers with any of their transmission needs. In-house machining ensures you only receive the best products from TSR Racing. Visit TSR Racing Products at tsr-racing.com or give them a call at 800-394-5889.
All right. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us here. Another episode of Going Bracket Racing. It's like 140 something, 143, I believe. And can't do it without you guys. Of course, being here with us live each event or on podcast form. We don't forget about you either. So thanks for listening in. And if you ever have any questions, we do get comments from our podcasters inside of our Facebook inbox. So if you have any questions, you got any comments that you want to leave, send those on to us. Casey and I read that stuff, and we'll definitely bring up your points and comments on the next live show. Crew Chief Pro, Proform Parts, Team 14 Motorsports, Ken Jones Performance, Driven Racing Oils, TSR Racing Transmission Products, BRG Motorsports 3D Printed Parts, 8th Mile Apparel. If you want to get any of that GBR merchandise, a lot of fresh things coming off the press there. I think there's going to be some... I don't think they're quite the pink Stanley Cup that somehow went crazy out in the country. I don't know what you guys thought about that Stanley Cup, but we got some GBR cups coming out on there pretty soon too. So,
they're half capacity, right? If it's 8 months, they gotta be half the capacity. Yeah.
Maybe they're Stanley. You never know. You might have to rip the logo off. I don't know what to tell you, but. Hey, go ahead over there to 8th Mile Apparel. You'll be able to get it. And as always, those guys at your ad here, George and Casey, those two guys, man, they appreciate everyone being inside the GBR community. If you would like to reach out to that community at any point in time, just feel free to get in contact with Going Bracket Racing at any platform. We'll be more than happy to get your product out to the GBR community. Getting back at it, and I had a few questions here. I'm going to just scroll up, and they're still coming in, so my chat will keep moving, and I'll stop. But Brian Cook, Brian Loans, came with a question that says, what about Pro Mods running to 1,000 feet? I think he's saying as an unleashed car as well, kind of being more or less unrestricted to the 1,000.
Yeah, so I can tell you that last year NHRA went to the Pro Mod teams and said, hey, are you guys interested in moving to an 8th mile format? They didn't necessarily talk about 1,000 feet. They talked to 8th mile. And I think the question was posed because really the NHRA series is the last quarter mile Pro Mod series that's left. Northeast Outlaw Pro Mod was, I think, like second to last to make the switch over just a couple seasons ago. And unanimous vote to no. And I don't think that was to protect their own interest. I think that the guys that are in that class want to keep it a quarter mile class. And yeah, you could move it to 1,000 feet, and we know how this game works. You can move anything you want. You can move the goalpost where you want the goalpost to be, but eventually they figure it out. I mean, Mike Salinas went 300 miles an hour in the 8th last year. So and so to the point, we still have in drag racing, thankfully, we still have in virtually every category that's heads up more horsepower than we can use. And the game has always been just figuring out how to use a little bit more. You make much more and you figure out how to use a little bit more, and they will figure it out. So my own personal opinion, I'd love for them to stay quarter mile.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. We got to have quarter mile Pro Mods somewhere, no matter what. And seemingly, Casey and I talk about this quite a bit. The fans do seem to like that 8th mile charge. Something about fast door cars that look similar to what we might drive on the street. moving that quickly through the 8th mile, and it's just even faster because the finish line's that much closer. So definitely a good question. Thanks for that.
Quick side note on that deal. I'm sure you saw the safety measures that Larry Jeffers built into Manny Bujinga's new Mustang.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that's something that needs to be adopted in an NHRA Pro Mod? Because it seems like when they turn around, that's whenever they lift, because a wing is made for downforce, but then you turn around backwards just like an airplane. Now it's causing lift.
In the air.
Yeah, I think the addition of the flaps, the vent flaps that they put in, the similar to the NASCAR vent flaps, I think it's a great idea. And it's obviously one of those things that I don't really ever want to have to see Manny test it. You know, Manny lives like 5 miles from me. I've known the guy for like 20 years, and he's been at the front of a lot of safety stuff. The flaps are the most notable part of that car, and he has some other stuff that he worked with Larry on that I think they're going to start talking about down the road. But I think it's cool. I think it's a great step forward. It does not visually change the car's appearance at all. It doesn't harm its performance at all. And if anything, exactly what you're saying. When we see these cars crash, you can almost textbook it. They move to the center of the racetrack, or they move to the outside of the racetrack, and they rotate. And as soon as they rotate, they're off to the races. So if you can create something that stops that lifting propensity when they get sideways, I'm all for it.
Keep them on the ground. Yeah. Hey, another question coming out of longtime follower. Here's Kevin Little. How many NHRA Factory X cars are out there?
This is good. So, Factory X, obviously this has been a much slower process than anybody would have wanted. The class was announced. Then every ship in the world went into port, and nobody shipped any parts anywhere for like a year. So that slowed things down a lot.
That could be cool.
But they're going to make their season debut in Vegas this year. And my understanding is there's more than a dozen of them out there now. And a lot of them have come out of chassis shops. We know Chris Holbrook's car, the Holbrook car, I should say, was featured in the Ford Performance setup. That thing looks gorgeous. Turk's out there. We've seen Stanfield's car. We're going to have a nice crop of Factory X cars to start the season with, and it's going to grow.
Nice. Casey, anything on the YouTube side before we get back on track?
Speaking to the Factory X comment, we have Bracket Racer 9622. Factory X should be the new Pro Stock drag Racer 4809. I agree. At least they look like real cars. I kind of agree with both those comments.
You can't get rid of the Pro Stocks, man. Here's my bid, Pro Stock. Y'all need me to come pull. Think I can get it done. I can let off the tree too. No, can't get rid of the Pro Stocks now. But I mean, I like the Factory X. Don't get me wrong, man. I love me some Pro Stock.
I mean, there's a clear argument to make on both sides. The first side of the argument is, well, the Factory X car is a lot closer to a factory car, uses a factory-based engine, has the factory dimensional body on it. Totally get all that. The other side of it is we now have a Pro Stock category that's going to have like 24 cars, 25 cars at every race. Right. And it may not be your favorite class to watch, so don't watch it. It's like, this TV show shouldn't be on the air because I hate this TV show. Well, don't turn the TV show on. Not the drag racing TV show. You love that one, but the other one. So, I'm literally working on a story right now for NHRA.com and a bunch of different Pro Stock stuff over the last couple seasons. And it is absolutely, when we talk about how close these cars are matched, it is the closest human performance class we have in drag racing now, right? And it's almost like the car, as much as I'm not disparaging the car, but in Pro Stock, the driver has infinitely more effect on where they finish on a given day, week, or season than they do in a nitro car. It just is. I mean, 2022, Erica's average qualifying lap time, she was low ET average of the season in qualifying at 658.2. The next season, 2023, her season average in qualifying 658.3. The number 2 average qualifier 658.6. The number 3 average qualifier 659.0.
Jeez.
7th out.
7th out. No, we can't get rid of that close. And it's exactly what you just said. Yep. The element of human is very much so relevant. And I think you can see it even through the TV set. Okay, a lot of these Pro Stock cars are equipped with all the good cameras. You can watch them do their thing, going through their gears. All the way to the burnout, there is some type of mental mind game that car is playing with you. So I gotta have it because that feeds me a little bit, watching somebody have to be machine-like.
I would just say this: if you look at pro stock and you're like, well, I don't like pro stock because I don't like the cars. Do yourself a favor: start the season, and don't even care. Pick a person. Root for people in pro stock. If the cars are annoying to you, that's fine. But the drivers are what you should be following. Then, if it's like, well, they all have the 500-inch motor, they all this, they do. But it's the person behind the wheel that's going to make the ultimate difference here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that leads into my next question, sort of, kind of, because it's drag racing we're talking about. But is drag racing currently bigger than it has ever been, in your opinion? You can use whatever metric you would like to in order to answer that question, in my opinion, because you may pull from things that Casey and I don't know that you've just been able to see being Brian Lohnes. You know what I mean? So how do you feel about that question?
I think it's in a participatory way. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say yes because there are more options and places to race of more different styles of cars than has ever existed. You know, it was not that long ago that you were a heads-up racer, a class racer, or a bracket racer locally. Now you can be a local, regional, or national touring bracket racer if you want. You can run national events. You can run divisional events. You can run the WDRA, the IHRA. Whatever other localized, the Mid-Atlantic .90 series, the Central United States .90 series. You can run a radial car. You can run a big tire car. You can run a pro mod. You can run Top Sportsman. I mean,
don't forget all the drag and drive stuff that is going on right now.
Right. And then there's that. Now, you know, drag and drive. I was on the original drag week in 2005, the very first one we ever had. Started in Kansas City International Raceway. There was like 39 cars on the first day. Globally, this year, there's going to be 32 drag and drive events around the world, from Canada, Australia. They do one in Sweden. Alaska had their own drag and drive event last year. Wow. So again, that takes us to that next level of the participation side of drag racing. Like, there is no excuse to not be involved. And then we even mentioned testing 2 nights, just going to beat on your car and work on it and have fun.
Grudge racing. I mean, grudge racing's huge in the Southeast.
Massive. You want to go, 28-10-5. You want to go the 484 bore spacing stuff. I mean, you can go right down the list. And I failed to mention, out of no disrespect, I failed to mention a PDRA. That's a whole series that didn't exist 10 years ago, whatever it was.
Right.
So, you know, if you wanted to run a pro mod back in 2010, you basically raced with the IHRA, or you raced a couple of NHRA events a year as an exhibition class and then dipped in and out when you wanted to. But it's totally different ballgame.
Yeah, Verge's out there now too. I mean, we've got what places to go and race for just about every speed of race car. And then, great answer.
And the other side of it is, you know, on the, like, the kids don't like cars side of it, kids aren't into cars. I think it's a garbage argument. And I've said this before, but when we were kids, because we're all old people now, when we were kids, we got our car magazines in the mail once a month, and we ripped through them in 2 days. And then hopefully maybe we saw Brett Kepner on Inside Drag Racing once or twice. Maybe we caught an NHRA national event. I got 2 teenage boys that they can flip on either their phone, their laptop, the TV, whatever, and drag racing is available literally infinitely in any way, shape, or form they want to watch it.
That's right.
Absolutely, man. It's definitely on an upward trajectory. I think it's better than it ever has been. I think a lot of that is attributed to just the simple fact that people figured out it was out there because of No Prep Kings. That's, if there's one good thing about No Prep Kings, it's the fact that people were like, man, fast cars are cool. They're loud. They're, you know, and then all those personalities, they might be a little dramatized on the show, but that is really what happens at the racetrack a lot of times. Like, there aren't a lot of people fighting at a bracket racing event, but every once in a while you'll get one. But going on to the next thing, if y'all haven't figured this out already, Brian is very into automotive and motorsports history. And I think your YouTube channel is just Brian Lohnes, right?
Yeah, very creatively named. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you check out that channel and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But I guess something that I just personally wanted to ask you is, what intrigued you so much about motorsports of the past?
You know, to me, it's just, you can find a little about a lot of stuff, and then it's tough to find a lot about anything. And that's what it's kind of like the weaving through history and finding this stuff out and getting a little bit of depth to a story that maybe you know a little bit about. But I mean, I don't know. I've always just loved, ever since I was a kid, I've loved reading and I've loved history, and it all just ties together. And for me, like, the drag racing side of it, drag racing is like a very linear history. Like you can just plot the chart. You can make a line graph with Dick Kraft's bug here in whatever it was 1952, and then Doug Coletta's top fuel dragster here in 2024, and you can pick out all those steps along the way. And the things that I guess make me most interested are finding the little slivers in time when something improved. Like even if it only improved this much, like what did somebody figure out, and then how did somebody compound on that? Because really, everything you see in modern drag racing is just a compounding of decisions over time. Like, radial cars. Like, I got my Menser Motorsports shirt on because Mark's a friend and I think it's a cool shirt. But, is radial racing what it is today without a guy like Mark Menser coming in from dirt track stock car racing, looking around going, you guys are doing it all wrong.
There was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot to be said about that because Jason Line was a NASCAR guy. And he learned a lot of stuff in NASCAR that then applied to pro stock because they're running at such a high RPM.
Absolutely. So, it's like these accrued experiences that come in and move the ball forward down the field. Those are the things that really, that I love to kind of dig into and understand, especially in the past. It's like building a puzzle backwards. You kind of always want to figure out how you got to certain things, or, if there are certain historical stories, like the next video I'm working on right now, I guarantee everybody here has seen the photos, but there is such an intriguing story behind the indoor drag racing they did in Chicago in the early 60s. They drag raced inside a building for 3 winters in Chicago. And we've all seen the picture of like Arnie Beswick's wagon in there or whatever, but it's like the actual story that people know this much of is going to be about 45 minutes long, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So it's that type of stuff. And just to go on your point, you mentioned Street Outlaws real quick. Like, several years ago, it's probably 10 years ago now, when No Prep Kings really started blowing up. I was on a show or something, and I think somebody had posed a question like, what's NHRA going to do about No Prep Kings? And it's like the small view of all this stuff in drag racing. The small view is if something is succeeding, that means something else is failing. And the elements you mentioned of No Prep Kings are absolutely accurate. Like, people got aware of what drag racing was. But the most important thing that series did was, and continues to do to this day, really, is to put a lot of people in the seats of racetracks. And we do not have a sport without racetracks. And we know, all of us know, how sensitive an issue this is right now with the threats that many of those places are under. So when people ask a question like, well, what's NHRA going to do about No Prep Kings? It's like, hopefully give them a high five and thanking them for putting people into racetracks that we also need to race at, and it keeps them viable and healthy. So that's the one thing that annoys me sometimes about our sport, is that if one little tribe is doing better than the other little tribe thinks they should, then it's a threat. Like, nobody in the sport is threatening to each other. That's not the point of this whole enterprise that any of us are involved in.
And at the end of the day, no sanctioning body or series or whatever can exist if there's not a track to race at. Ultimately, that's the thing that always, I've said that on this show 1,000 times, and I beat the dead horse to death if it wasn't already dead. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're John Force. It doesn't matter if you're Casey Beckmeyer. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a guy who wants to get into racing and doesn't even have a car yet, if there's no track to race at, don't ever bash the tracks, because if there's no track to race at, it doesn't matter who you are, because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and look, I've thankfully been to a zillion of these places across the country, and some of them are run exceptionally well, and some of them are run exceptionally bad. And it's painful to be at a place that is run badly, because it's like, man, when some of these places close, and obviously there's outside factors when someone comes in with some crazy real estate offer or something, but a lot of times the worst enemy of a racetrack is itself. If you have management and leadership that isn't fully invested in what's going on, they get angry, and in turn they treat their customers badly, and in turn the customers go somewhere else. You know how this cycle works. But yeah, your point on racetracks is it. Without that, none of this exists.
Yeah, no question about it. That was definitely a interesting conversation we have there, and I definitely thank you for pointing out the fact that we need to support the racetrack as much as possible. And piggybacking off of all the racing that we're going to be doing this year, a lot of these local tracks are starting to amp their game up quite a bit for their local racing program. One that sticks out to me, and one that I hope gets modeled quite a bit, is going to happen at Mid-State Dragway in Havana, Illinois, where they're going to be running I believe it's 6 weekends, $10,000 per day. So Saturday and Sunday you're racing for 10 grand, but at the same time inside of a points program. So definitely glad to see that happening there. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. I don't know if everybody can see Casey like I see him. I bet Brian sees it and just was like, I don't know what the heck's going on here. But Casey is like two-faced right now on my screen. And it's actually
There we
pretty
go, man.
Yeah, if you like scoot all the way towards your window, your camera would be like you in the camera,
Right?
and then half your face is just like stuck.
Oh,
So
wow.
I can't fix that for now, guys. But just thought I'd point that out there. I was definitely paying attention, but I was trying to fix whatever that is too. So
Well, it's his good half. It's his good half that's frozen. So that's
it is his good half, though.
I don't
Now
know if I have a good half.
I believe everybody would disagree if you could see what we see, Casey. Everybody's gonna disagree with that. I mean, it's a still
whatever.
photo, Casey. It looks like it would be what's on your license.
Yes.
This show's about Brian Lohnes, not about me.
All right.
Don't worry about it.
So let's move to the next question. Who was the most innovative person in drag racing history, in your opinion? And then what was the most important innovation to come to drag racing? Tough one, I know. It caught you off guard a little bit.
That's a great question because that can go a trillion ways. If we go from the promotional side, we can go to Jim Tice. I think Jim Tice of the NHRA probably promotionally was one of the most innovative guys, if not the most innovative. I would put Bill Donor in that category as well. Just the legendary races he put on that influenced generations of people going forward. Mechanically, Garlits is the easy answer, but and it's everybody pins the one thing on him with the rear engine deal, but he certainly was one of the greatest innovators of the sport. But then how do we look past like the door car stuff? Like how do we look past that whole side of drag racing? How do we look past the Tim McCamises of the world, the Tommy Moonies of the world, the people who really, without Tommy Mooney, without Tim McCamus, without Alan Pittman, without some of these real foundational chassis guys from back in the day, we don't have pro mods like we have them today. So, man, the most singularly innovative person in drag racing history, that is a very difficult question. You can go all the way back to a guy like Scotty Fenn back in the 50s who started the idea of a commercially available production line chassis that, guys in Massachusetts ran Scotty Fenn chassis that were welded together in California. So, man, you go to Tom Hoover, invented the Chrysler Hemi, right? If Tom Hoover doesn't do the 426 Hemi, what are we talking about today? A bunch of guys racing inline six flathead motors on fuel? I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about. So right. If I could make a composite person, it would be all those people in one, and that would be the most innovative person.
And so while we're watching Casey on the other end try to solve whatever he's got going on with his camera, I'm just going to throw one off the cuff, kind of something that I feel for myself. What would you say, and this is 100% opinion-based, what would you say was more beneficial to NHRA fuel class? Would we say the canopy inside of the dragster class or the automatic shutoff system that they're holding behind the race cars nowadays? What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm going to go with the shutoff system in that, we can't calculate stuff that doesn't happen, right? It's kind of funny, like how much money did it save? Well, you can't really do the math on engines that don't explode. We know how much an engine costs that does explode. How many engines have been saved? How many crankshafts, how many connecting rods have been not beaten to death with a misfiring cylinder that a crew chief has shut off on an early qualifying pass? Honestly, since those things have existed, it has to be in the millions of dollars when you think about how much this stuff costs and how often it needs to be replaced. So, if you're saving a supercharger at $25,000 and in theory saving one or two of those a weekend sometimes, all categories, and we now do that 22 times a year plus however many years that system has existed, that thing has had to have saved millions of dollars of parts.
100%. 100%. I'm just curious about that, and I had a little bit of time while Casey solved this problem, which welcome back, buddy. I know you probably heard that. You probably heard the question as well, but welcome back in here, and thanks for that answer, Brian. Casey, we're on number 8.
This is somebody you know. This is a great question right here. So, Andrew Bostrom, the Bostonian.
Yep.
So we interviewed him at PRI. And by the way, if you guys haven't seen that, it's something I think it came out earlier this week or the week prior on either Facebook or YouTube. It's on both of them somewhere. So check that out because it's period correct NHRA 70s Pro Stock Demon that we were, of course, turned on to by Michael Beard by happenly walking in. Oh, there's Michael Beard. Where's Michael Beard? By a Mopar, of course. So anyway, what I wanted to ask was what in your opinion was the most fascinating time in NHRA history? And if you had the opportunity to bring back one class from the dead, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good one. The most fascinating time, I would say the very right after the nitro ban was lifted at national events. I would say from 1963 to 1965, 66, to me would be the most fascinating period because things rapidly developed. I mean, you're talking, that's when twin disc clutches started getting used. That's when the tires started to improve. That's when, guys started showing up with nitro motors and full bodied steel cars that they had to run in fuel dragster classes because there was nowhere else to put them. So that would be a time period I'd love to go back to and witness firsthand. And then what class to drag out of the dead? Everybody says modified production because it's awesome. Small block and big 50-pound flywheel and manual transmission. That would be on the list. And look, I would not hate seeing fuel alters at national events. So
Wow.
with the stipulation that they couldn't be 125-inch wheelbase. They'd have to be shorter than that. They'd have to be legit old school, 90-some-inch wheelbase fuel alters. But I'd pull them out of the depths.
Fuel altereds kind of run with funny cars. Like, wouldn't that be cool to see a little bit of different stuff? Where I've always thought that, and this was what I was kind of getting at earlier, never really got all the way there, but I've always kind of thought the nitro cars at this point are so fast and they're so capable that, I mean, a lot of times there's been several years where the NHRA national record, the fastest car has been a funny car, not a dragster.
Yeah.
So couldn't you just say all nitro runs together essentially? Like, wouldn't that be cool for the fans to say, I'm a dragster guy, or I'm an altered guy, or I'm a funny car guy, and then they're all, it could cause a whole bunch of hype, have a 32 car field or something?
It would be cool. I mean, there's no way around it. It would be cool. You'd have to handicap the dragster somehow, just because right now you're looking at a performance spread. Speed wise, of course, the funny cars will outdo them basically on the rev limiter. They have more available rev limiter to use. I think it's 500 RPM or so. So that allows them to typically run the higher speeds. But yeah, I mean, an open fuel type class, Nitro Chaos is doing it, and it's cool. If you've ever watched a Nitro Chaos event, you have funny car chaos, and the Nitro Chaos side is, as long as it's got nitro in the tank, you're pretty much good to go. And I think they did edit the rules now that the engine has to be in the front. So it's going to be altereds and slingshots and funny cars. So,
well, the Meyer sisters were coming and beating up on everybody.
Yeah, and credit to them. I mean, great team, professional level team, and I respect the decision Chris Graves made there in the series, because that is the type of series where, I think that could run people off. And that's no disrespect to the Meyers. They came in and raced, as they always do, at the highest level. But I think that might have scared the pants off of some people, and you just don't want to see people, run off like that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to at least have a chance. Otherwise, you're not going to show up. And in a heads up category, whenever you have potentially a 3/10, I mean, that's a lot. It's not like a 10th.
No, it's a train length. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got a comment here from Michael Beard, actually, as we sit here and discussed him in the very beginning. Michael Beard is saying, when Pro Stock Truck was having trouble, one of the founding drivers called Bill Bader Sr. and said, "You need to give us a home in IHRA." Instead, Bill suggested that they stay in NHRA, but put nitrous on the trucks. "We'll get thrown out" was the answer, I believe, here. And he says, with this trademark sly smile, Bill replied, "But you'll put on a show." Can you see, kind of piggybacking off of what he's trying to say there, the return of Pro Stock Truck ever with some type of an additive, such as a turbo or nitrous enhanced?
I mean, now we're basically just talking about a small block pro mod at that point. You know what I mean? I think there's a redundancy. To me, there's a redundancy there, and I think there was a redundancy in the creation of the class. Pro stock truck was obviously at the time a response to NASCAR, the Craftsman Truck Series when they first came in, and that became a thing, and it had its moment in the sun. The inner workings of its closure as a pro class, I know, were a big mess, and I don't know any of the inner workings of it. But I do enjoy seeing them in comp. Every once in a while we see one roll up as a pro stock truck automatic, or even this correct stick shift transmission in them. But yeah, pro stock truck with a power adder to me is a small block.
Another pro mod.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a great answer. I just wish I seen more of them. You know what I mean? The pro stock, any truck. I have a truck as a bracket car. I'm a Door Trucks Rule fan. If I can push trucks to the front, I will. Literally or whatever it takes physically. If I have to do that too, I'll push it to the front. But is there a reason you would think that we don't see very many pro stock style trucks or pro mod trucks out there? Because I can't name one.
Yeah, I think they just give up too much aerodynamically anymore. A bed, just the physical dimensions of those things, and even though bodies are all shrunk down and everything else, I feel like when we're talking about the performance of those things now, and listen, that's why did everybody go to that same late model Camaro body? Because it's the slickest thing going, and you can make all the rules you want by rewarding people a weight break to run a Willys body or this, that. It's not going to move the needle until somebody comes out with something better, and that's an interesting thing where it's like the professional racing is different than other forms of racing, right? Like a professional team is going to look at what their best equipment is to try to win the race. They don't necessarily care what shape it is. They don't care about your feelings towards 69 Camaros or 2023 Camaros. What they care about is that thing is 2 or 3 mile an hour faster and a couple of hundredths faster through the end of the racetrack than anything else. So that's what they want to have.
No, that's a fact. That's a 100% fact.
Yeah.
No, Casey, man, we're coming up on my last question here, I think, and that question is: there are a lot of people who would like to make a career in drag racing. I would be one of those people. Being on the premises at all these major events, could you speak a bit about how many more opportunities that there are to work within motorsports that people might not know about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways in. It seems like it's a pretty closed off deal, but there's a lot of ways in. Obviously, my way was on the media side. If you're somebody with a commercial driver's license or somebody who is willing to get one, that is your first golden ticket into the world of professional drag racing. And the fact of the matter is, even a lot of the pro mod teams now have guys that work on the car and drive their rig. Most of the time, the drivers are at their business doing what they're doing, and they're flying into the racetrack, and their crew guys are getting there and setting stuff up. So even if they're traveling not in a tractor trailer, but a coach that's longer than a tractor trailer, typically they have a professional driver in that thing. So the most foundational thing I can tell you is the CDL route, as far as if you ever wanted to work on a team, or even, I'll be honest, work for a sanctioning body. Like the NHRA hires people that have CDLs because we have tractor trailer trucks that have to go down the road, and your only job isn't driving the truck. These are guys that do various functions over the course of the typical race weekends, whether they work on the side of racetrack preparation, they do like facility stuff, whatever. And then I know a load of guys who have gone to work in hospitality roles to become crew guys. That's the other kind of new pathway that's in. If you don't have the CDL, yes, you have not woken up in the morning and ever dreamed about serving macaroni at lunchtime. But if you go in there with the stated goal of, I want to work on a race car, but if I have to serve macaroni until somebody else quits or is fired, and then I can work on the race car, that is something that all these teams appreciate. There's a multitude of people on those teams right now that took the long way in. And most of the time, if you're motivated to be a crew guy, there's enough shifting around and movement over the course of a year that you're probably going to get off the breadline, so to speak. You're going to get off slinging rolls at lunch and actually get to turning wrenches and doing what you want to do. Those are just two ways. And the third way is, like, work at your local racetrack. Like, all these places are always looking for people. And that is the most valuable experience I ever got. Like, working at New England Dragway as a kid and at Lebanon Valley, like, You simply learn how to be around the racetrack. You guys know this because you've been doing it a long time, but how many times do you see people who are not really accustomed to where they're at, just not paying attention or wandering around, and they're not looking in the right place or whatever? Like, when the time comes, if you have worked at your local track and put in the time, if something opens up, you walk into that with a load of experience. You understand where you're supposed to be, where you're not supposed to be. You understand what the whole racetrack mentality is, eyes up. You don't walk in there totally green. So, we talked about this before we went on air, but get in where you fit in. And that really is the way it works in motorsports. Like, you can find a way in using whatever applicable skills you have and use those skills to kind of navigate where you want to go.
And there's a lot of skills to be learned by running a racetrack. For example, I live right down the road from Galot Motorsports Park, one of the premier bracket racing facilities in the entire country. But the thing is, like Galot, they have monster trucks there. They have tractor pulls there. They have big money bracket races there, a weekly program there. PDRA goes there twice, I think. NHRA has a divisional event there. Think about just being involved with that, how much you can learn, and just your life skills that you learn by dealing with all the sponsors involved, dealing with all the people involved. And then that could be a stepping stone to a very big time job in life. If it's not at that track, it could translate somewhere else. All the things that you could learn, that would be, and you could get in working there. That's a job you could never get offered in real life had you not been a college graduate, something like that in that particular field. So you can learn a lot of life skills just being around the track, and the people you meet by being around the track. Those big haulers weren't paid for by, just
Correct.
kicking rocks, So there's a lot of money out there and a lot of business owners out there. But Brian, man, we appreciate you spending this last hour with us and everything and coming on the show. Who do you have to thank before you get off here?
I got to thank you guys for having me on. I love these conversations. I think we touched on a lot of great points. I'm obviously very excited for the NHRA season to kick off. I think the US Street National showed us once again that the pro mod world is as strong as it's ever been, and guys like Lyle Barnett coming back full time with Tidwell for 24 in the NHRA series is a great thing. But I guess the last thing I'd say is I think a lot of times we clutch our pearls and we rub our rosary beads because we're afraid about drag racing, and it's like, one morning, wake up and tell yourself that this is a healthy, strong sport. And the more that we believe that of ourselves, the better off we are, because there's a racetrack getting built in Jacksonville right now. Obviously, Flying H drag strips getting built outside of Kansas City, and it doesn't replace anything that's closed down, especially if it's your local track. But the more often we wake up and stare at the sky and wait for it to fall down on top of us, the more we're going to bring it on ourselves. So if you're watching this, my inspirational message of the day is drag racing is healthy. Act like it's healthy. Carry yourself like it's healthy, and enjoy it for what it is. That is all.
That is all. Yeah, that is perfect way to end this show today, guys. We thank everybody for joining in, leaving your chats, your comments, hitting that like and share button to get your friends and family into the community as well. Thank you, Brian, for taking time out of your busy day. Sure, we'll see you soon, whether you like it or not. All we got to do is turn on the television set, for crying out loud, and watch a little NHRA. So on behalf of GBR, thank you again. And everyone else, we will see you guys next Tuesday.